Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Backlash. I'm your host, David J. Riley. Today is Monday, March 2nd. Just a couple minutes. Running a couple of minutes late here, but it'll be good. We've got a great show for you today. We've got Karl Dahl, an author, multiple books, got a Substack, very good stuff. So looking forward to talking with him. Been kind of a slow news weekend, hasn't it? Not much has really been going on, has it? Have I missed something? Oh, yeah, we went to war with Iran. Something we've been predicting on this show for several months. I think a lot of people have been calling this, and it's just, it's pretty sad. We've got four confirmed deaths at this point, American troops. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into some of Karl's books. But first, please make sure that you are following us on X at Real Backlash. You can find all of our posts on our website, thebacklash.net. You can support the show by going to subscribestar.com/thebacklash, patreon.com/thebacklash. You can always send in your super chats at thebacklash.net/superchat, or you should be able to send in super chats on our YouTube and Rumble rants on our Rumble channel. We are monetized on both. Still, don't know how. It's a miracle. But you can find all of our platforms at thebacklash.net/subscribe. Like I said, we're over on YouTube at Real Backlash, rumble.com/backlash podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got to give a couple of shout outs to our sponsors. First up is ODGG Supply. Things are getting crazy. And so whether you're going blanky mode or tactical mode, ODGG Supply has got you covered with battle-tested military surplus. AboveTimeCoffee.com. They are a pro-white small batch coffee roaster in Pennsylvania. Check them out at AboveTimeCoffee.com. Antelope Hill Publishing.com. They're fighting to keep history alive. IdahoTallow.com and AtlasBullion.com/backlash. So, thank you so much for joining us. Without any further ado, here is our guest. He's got a nice little avatar on. He's not face doxed. Karl, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll get into your books in a little bit, but first, what are your thoughts about what's been going on over the past 48 hours, or 72 hours, I guess? We've gone to war with Iran. It's crazy. We're getting statements now from the Trump campaign that Donald Trump will not rule out sending U.S. troops, boots on the ground, if necessary. He said that he doesn't care about polling. And, of course, we've already had 4. The death toll has gone to 4, which is certainly not good. I think there was actually a clip going around of Trump saying that there might be many more. So what's your take on the war with Iran?
Well, I think we know that we live in an occupied country, and the rhetoric around this stuff is really should be quite simple, but of course it isn't. And the positioning is always in terms of, well, it's really easy, and remember last year we just did some strikes that essentially Iran, like reading between the lines, kind of let happen, and they just hit Israel. And now, of course, because of the extent of the destruction and the fact that it seems to be for real this time and not just some random, base saving, posing missile launches and air attacks, they're kind of chimping out. And so, of course, it makes sense when you have a non-negotiation capable country like the United States that they're doing something that would be effective, which is to hit U.S. assets in the region. And, it just goes to show that in a world where things are mostly pretend and our sclerotic leadership never has consequences for any of their actions, that consequences are just waiting, and like reality and history are just waiting to resume. And we could easily be seeing that. So what it does is it makes me think of in the 90s, the late 90s, Americans were tired of not only the Cold War, but also the kind of nation building nonsense that our troops were doing in the 90s. And so you have George W. Bush, who promised that he would bring an end to that. 9/11 happens. How convenient. We have the greatest nation building effort in the world ever, really, which took place then. And so you can't just say, this is regime change without really being regime change, and we're just going to kill until we find someone we can negotiate with in Iran. It's not easy. Like, you can't just blow people up. There are consequences to it. My concern, frankly, is that we're going to see what I've kind of been expecting, which is the U.S. being taken off the board regionally, as it were, with something that will frankly divide people tremendously. And I think it's highly likely that it'll happen. Will it be done by Israel or will it be done by Iran? Right? Because they have a record of that, and the Israeli path to short term, they're hitting their goals, hitting their marks, hitting their targets, as it were, is to embroil the United States in this to where we actually have to send in troops to Iran. That's the goal of Israel. Getting calibrated brutally for several months after Israel takes out theoretically takes out some a carrier group, or just enough to really piss people off. We're already at the point where more than 50% of the U.S. population will assume that Israel did it, regardless of who does it. So it's just one of those things that just has to happen. Like, it just seems like this is the point in history that we're at, where we can talk about how we don't want new wars and occupational wars and ground wars and all that, but the only way that it's really going to happen is if we are physically removed from the region, or we remove ourselves from the region, or some combination of the two plays out. So we will have to see what happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. There was this map that I just had up on the screen. Let's see if I can get it back. iOS did an update, and now my system is glitchy.
Of course.
So there we go. Okay. This is a map from theexpress.com showing all of the Iranian strikes in yellow, U.S. and Israeli strikes in red. Obviously, we've been hitting a lot of stuff around Tehran, but the Iranians have hit Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Israel, Jordan, basically, wiping out a lot of U.S. capabilities here in the Straits of Hormuz. And it's incredible because the ballistics that we're seeing come out of Iran at this point are a lot better than what we saw last year. There was a video, I don't have it up, but it's circulating pretty widely on X and other social media platforms, showing this ballistic missile, a hypersonic missile, evading, I think, 10 of the Iron Dome things, whatever, the counter projectiles. It just wove right through them and then blasted straight into Tel Aviv. So I think the Iranians...
Oh, no.
Yeah, oh, no. So anyway, I think the Iranians, they've got a lot of capability. And it's crazy, too. There's been a lot of reporting out, and it's very back and forth. We saw... initially, they were talking about how, Khomeini is dead, or Khamenei, I forget which, the Ayatollah, 601. They're all the same. They're all the same to me. But we were seeing how he was dead, and then the Iranians put up like a pre-recorded press conference trying to pretend like he wasn't dead. And then it turns out, okay, yeah, he's dead. And then there's other reporting that Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, that he was dead. And then it comes out that he's not dead. And apparently we know this because he got in touch with Patrick Bet David. That's weird. Patrick Bet David would not be like on the short list for me to call if I were the former president of Iran. But so anyway, there's a lot of conflicting reports about what exactly is going on. There's a lot of fog of war. And so we're going to be, obviously tracking this as it continues. It's pretty interesting. It seems like the markets have been reacting. Brent crude oil is up. Bitcoin is up. Gold, silver down a little bit. But this is clearly just the beginning. We've got some clips here that I'll play from President Trump. Let's see what he has to say real quick.
And send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but
unreal. He was out here. I've got a video of him on the campaign trail from this was 2024. Take a listen and contrast with what you just heard.
I will tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and you're not going to have a third world war with me. That I can tell you.
Yeah. So that was fake. That was fake and gay. And the latest that we're getting here is that Trump is saying this could take up to 4 to 5 weeks. Let's take a quick look at this.
A threat indeed it is. We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody actually said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No.
Anyway, it's just unbelievable. We've got dead Americans at this point, and he's on TV talking about, this will go for 4 or 5 weeks, and talking about getting bored. Do you think that people are in this country going to be able to protest this? Do you think that this is going to spark protests, or do you think that everybody's just asleep?
Oh, there'll be protests. And I think, it's just all a part of the kind of delegitimization of the system that we have. Like this, he got the support that he got, from the people for their reasons, but he was supported in, coming back. My position is that, he came back because of October 7th and the resulting everything. There was a reshuffling of priorities among the various folks moving behind the scenes, and, kind of regrouping and reclustering of different factions. And a lot of our assumptions about the way that, the world worked, just ceased to have predictive power when that happened. And so now we get to see, which factions have more influence here and there, and, what their real motivations are and what they're going to try to do in response. And honestly, I somewhat assumed that they were going to wait a little longer before doing this, that they would have tried to build up a little more legitimacy. But obviously, Bibi couldn't wait. And they're the ones that are setting the tempo. They're the ones that are making this play out, and we're reacting to them. And it's just completely insane, because I had assumed that they would wait a little longer so that we could build up our capabilities a little bit better. There seems to be an assumption that you can go for a knockout blow. And if he's talking about 4 to 5 weeks, that tells me that they're expecting Iran to expend their ordnance to the point where it'll become sustainable at some point. And there won't be more like real crippling strikes that they'll be able to do. And I don't know, we'll find people who get tired of it in Iran. Whereas in the 12-day war, like all Iran has to do is stick it out, and they can punish Israel very badly. And so it'll just be a matter of who has the stomach for it continuing. So we shall see. And this just reinforces that whole like don't fall for it, don't let your kids join the military position that I think the vast majority of people took, even going into a second Trump administration. Like there might be a handful of MOSs where it could possibly be worth it because our whole system, in the late aughts or early teens became oriented toward like there's no future in private enterprise. The only way out, the only way to like have a retirement and a future for the vast majority of people is government service. And by the way, that means that you have to risk, being crippled and maybe have like a sand curse put on you so that your suicide rate is incredibly high as we deny our ability to assert our own religious faith in sand land. It's completely insane, and it's so poorly thought out. If I was an evil genius on that side, I would have waited at least 10 to 15 years for this.
Wow.
But
it doesn't line up with like the fake prophecy bullshit that they've been pushing. There's also something we've talked about on this show quite a lot. I don't have it. I'll pull it up real quick. Something called the curse of the 8th decade. Carl, have you heard about this?
That's essentially that, ascendant open power by these people will never last more than
80. Hello. Can you hear me now, Carl? Testing. Well, Carl cut out and my computer froze momentarily, so we'll have to see. But hoping that Carl can come back. What I was talking about, of course, was this article from Mizrahi.org, The Curse of the 8th Decade, which basically talks about how the Jews have never had their own territory, their own sovereign land for longer than 80 years. In the First Temple period and the Second Temple period. The First Temple, that was toast after 80 years. The Second Temple after 77 years. And of course, Israel is now 76, 77 years old. So the 8th decade is looming. And there's also all of this, prophecy nonsense that's been pushed by all of the people like Pastor John Hagee. We do have a clip from him that we can play. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let's try restarting. Carl, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
There we go. All right, very good. Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, like I said, my computer updated and it's getting all wonky on me. But talked a little bit about this curse of the 8th decade. There's also this clip here that I wanted to play of this Christian Zionist pastor, John Hagee. He gave a speech yesterday.
Oh Lord!
Let's subject ourselves to 2 minutes.
God bless you, Mr. President, for being a friend of Israel. God bless you for having the courage to do what others feared to do. God bless our fighting forces in the Middle East in the brilliant execution. God bless our forces in the Middle East in the brilliant execution of Operation Epic Fury.
This is crazy.
Today we will discover in Bible
Nice
prophecy
grammar.
that God has an Operation Fury. He has planned for Iran and Russia in the near future. Stay tuned in the television audience. Let's read Psalms 122, 6 through 9.
Man, we're not going to do that.
Let's go to Zog Church.
Oh my God. But it's like you've got these, and I've been dealing with this up here in North Idaho for like 4 years now. These Christian Zionists, they're like, we're pro-life. We're pro-life. We think life is sacred, blah, blah, blah. Please, sign our petition to protect life in the state of Idaho. And then it's like these same people will pull shit like this where they, well, praise God for the work we're doing in the Middle East. And it's like, what exactly is happening in the Middle East? Oh, well, how about this? Things like the Ayatollah's granddaughter being vaporized by bombs, and people are celebrating this, right? This is who we are celebrating getting killed right now. People like this. There's also a school that got hit with over 160 Iranian children, little girls, blown to pieces. And this is what Pastor Hagee and all of the people in Washington, D.C. think is just an amazing, God, this is God's justice, blah, blah, blah. And it's sick. It's deranged,
It's blasphemous.
Yes, it is. So here's the question. Do you think that this action in Iran, especially if it turns south, do you think it will bring America to the brink of a civil war?
It easily could, depending on how various players play things out. The biggest concern, the biggest loss is that there was a chance. And again, yes, I know who we're dealing with, but there was a chance that we Zogbots. And that means, industrially and career-wise opportunities, regrowth. Like there's this huge, we need to power up, we need nuke plants so that we can do not only AI stuff, but also, fulfill the demand for, reindustrialization, right? And you need the reindustrialization to support these wars, in terms of real big boy wars, not this stupid limited, we're just going to launch certain, high-tech, incredibly expensive weapons until we run out of them in a couple weeks. So you would think that would be the smart move, is to, re-equip us in kind of a World War II mentality, right? Because, the paranoid, not paranoid, the accurate, the accurate framing that they're just going to, get Trump in so that we can have buy-in for another war. It doesn't really make sense if you're a sensible, thoughtful, master villain who has to be like, well, we need the level of support that we had in World War II, which I'll remind people, the vast majority of American soldiers in World War II were draftees. And, the people going into 1941 were incredibly opposed by I think it was 80-20 or 86-14, completely opposed to participating in a war in Europe. There was the legacy of World War I. There was, we know what it's really all about, which is supporting the communists and destroying the Germans. And people knew what World War I was. And there was enough legitimacy in the government and the American system, and things were good enough for people that even though it wasn't popular at the time, they were able to spin it so that a lot of the resistance to it went away, or at least, like, if you're imprisoned for sedition at the drop of a hat and things were good enough and we were attacked by Japan, like, people on the West Coast were incredibly upset over the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And so you can see how, and then we just had an incredible industrial base. Like, we won that war for our side through production. That is not the case anymore.
No.
That is not the case anymore whatsoever. We're also behind the curve technologically in terms of, like, cost-effective, important weapons. Like, the cost of the weapons that we're launching are insane.
Yeah, there was. I remember there was reporting after the 12-day war talking about the THAAD battery system, which I thought that we had shot enough of the. It would take like somewhere between 5 and 10 years to replenish the amount of. I think we shot like a quarter of our stockpile in just that 12-day period. So for us to go 5 weeks, well, then that means that our THAAD battery is going to be out 75%.
We're going to,
and then we're just defenseless. Then we would be
areas. Yeah, our forces in the area are just going to get hosed, and then they will. Then that's casus belli, right? Which is like the most illegitimate framing of all time. And Trump, validly in his first term wanted to pull U.S. forces out of Iraq, out of Syria, out of all these places, and he wasn't allowed to by the military. And we all got to see, not only is it pretend in the way that you think it is, it's even more pretend than you imagined. That, like, you can legitimately tell the military, we're going to do this, and they just go, nah, dog. So it's, this is, again, the purpose of this for us is a delegitimization of an illegitimate system, right? I mean, that's going to be what it's going to be. Okay, that's the angle you guys are taking. All right.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, I remember, for those that have seen some of my streams and stuff like that, know my background. My parents, we used to own a network of radio stations in Pennsylvania. Before 2017, we got, boycotted by Antifa, the Democrats, and all of that. But from 2005 on, my dad, who had the morning show, he was talking about this Iran war 20 years ago. 20 fucking years ago. And it seems like we're like rapidly like approaching almost like an end of history type moment. It seems like almost all U.S. foreign policy for the past 50 years has been kind of gearing up towards this. And I don't think it's going to go well. And even if it does go well, like, define going well. Okay. So if things go well for the United States, that means that things are going well for Israel. And essentially we're going to be creating a giant superpower in the Middle East that we will not be able to restrain in any meaningful way. And
absolutely,
the Israelis will have control over the rimland in the Middle East, the Straits of Hormuz, oil production, manufacturing, and the Belt and Road Initiative, which is going to link China to Africa directly through, like, Jordan and the occupied Israeli territory. So it's just crazy. It's just so crazy. All the memes were true. Nick Fuentes was right. You know what I mean? I had this up on the screen, the Trump MAGA supporter with the Fell For It Again award. It's oh my God. I mean, I hate it. I hate that we've been right about it this entire time. But yeah, and there's also something which is interesting, not to toot my own horn a little bit, but I mentioned this about a month ago, back in January, speculating about the Venezuela situation and whether or not whether or not taking over Venezuela and the oil production was essentially a way to kind of clear the way for, if the Straits of Hormuz are closed, that it will not affect the West. It's starting to look like that's exactly what was happening. So anyway, we'll have more updates on this story, obviously, throughout the week as it continues. But I want to start talking a little bit about your books. I wanted to talk a little bit about, was it Faction and Faction with the Crusaders? We've got links in the show notes below. These are both books written by Karl. Very good. I've got a copy of this one. I've been reading it as I fly places. I think I'm on like chapter 20, not sure. But I'm still working my way through it.
It's very long.
Yeah, this one is much longer than this one. So if you could tell us a little bit about your books, what inspired you to write them, what are they about?
Yeah, so I've been writing for a really long time, and I had this Faction was this thing that I began working on literally in the late 90s. And it took almost 2 decades for it to come to fruition. And that I would write little scenes, but the overarching theme and like the reason we're reading about it was something that had to evolve. And frankly, it smacked me upside the head during the total eclipse in 2017. And rather than getting hyper mystical about it, I'll just say that like I knew exactly what I had to do. And the title comes from the fact that, in the old days, in the kind of libertarian influenced space on online right discourse or libtarded discourse, like there was like the government, capital T, capital G, and people had these really simple models for the way US foreign policy and domestic policy worked, but in reality at any given time you're dealing with different factions that have competing interests, and so they can spin something up, like they, capital T, can spin something up, but then the people executing on it, oftentimes have totally different interests. And so, and you really see this in foreign policy in out of the way areas, where you have little different groups that are making things happen. And so in Faction, it's a story from the point of view following a college student whose family is involved in kind of off books, black money, espionage type stuff, through shell companies and the like, for, covert operations. And he is essentially being brought into the family business. And then Faction with the Crusaders is a telling of the Spanish Civil War from the perspective of his, the 90s character's grandfather, Joe Shea, who gets into the business of espionage during the Spanish Civil War. And part of the purpose of it was not only to tell a right-wing, nationalist sympathetic perspective on the Spanish Civil War, because most English language material is very libtarded, and frankly incoherent in reality versus a narrative which doesn't really comport with reality very well. People know their Orwell, they know their Hemingway, and then they know, nationalists, funny mustache man. Like it's little straight lines. In reality, it's a much more complicated story. And it's one that, again, rhymes with ours in that it's a large, powerful or once powerful country that is very regionalized, and it has lots of different competing and to unite despite interests in terms of, you know, what matters.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, hold on a second. I think I've got to refresh again. My bad. This is crazy. Hold on a second. Dude, I'm gonna sue Apple. This is like not working. Come on. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Dude, I'm going to have to like sue Apple or something. Like, how do you roll out like new firmware or new operating system and then it just breaks everything? It's like, I can't even have like Photoshop and OBS up at the same time. It's nuts.
Sir, do not redeem.
Do not redeem it, sir. But yeah, so if you could, reading Faction with the Crusaders, it's interesting. You know, it follows this guy, Joseph Shea, who's like, I think he was from like Oregon or like Portland area. And then, you know, he wants to go see the world. He goes over to Spain. He links up with some interesting people like journalists and gets involved with intelligence. But, you know, reading the book and finding out about the dynamics in Spain at the time, there were a bunch of different factions, right? There were the Phalangists. There were the Carlists. There were the Raquette armies. Which were like monarchists. They wanted the restoration of the king. The fascists wanted a dictator. There were, I guess, more moderate groups. And then, of course, you have all these different leftist groups, the anarcho-syndicalists, the communists, the Republicans. And so can you give us like a thumbnail sketch over how that worked and how Franco was able to kind of unite all of those people? And not to make this like a super run-on question, but how that may kind of play out in a country like America, where we've got our different factions. You know, you've got the America First faction, you've got the kind of weird BAP sphere, like they're like white nationalists, but pro-Israel. Then there's, of course, just like the pro-Israel crowd. There's the boomers, you know, and you see it up here in Idaho too, that, you know, there's like a bunch of different factions, you know, and if they don't unite, we're screwed. But how did this play out in Spain?
So the best way to put it, without, you know, putting on a Putin hat and going back hundreds of years, which I've done. I've done a bunch of shows with Pete Quinones on the topic, and we at one point we began well before the Romans conquered Iberia. and the purpose of that was to show that you have these areas that map to different, you know, ethno-linguistic traditions, and as well as governing traditions. And so basically in Spain, let's just put it this way, you know, everyone knows, you know, they boot out the Moors. 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. They also kick out the Jews at the same time, in time for a Spanish Golden Age. Imagine that. And what really matters is that they began to go outside and focus outside of Spain. And then internally, the tradition had always been that there was this strong regionalist flavor in the way the place was governed, and as long as you were ticking the boxes of, you know, Moors, you could kind of govern yourself. And that continued during the expansionist period. And when Spain lost its empire in the 19th century, again jumping way ahead, you know, the different regions hadn't really been enriched by this imperial period. You could see it in pockets, like families would be wealthy, you know, there would be great cathedrals, there would be certain government buildings and stuff. But even the king was only literally getting his royalty, right? He was only getting his cut of the money flow. A lot of the money coming from the colonies was paying for stuff that was supplied by other parts of Europe, or whatever. So the skim model didn't really trickle down very well in a lot of places. And so you developed this interesting thing where by the late 19th century, you had leftist European ideas all over the place, and the government was essentially handing through ballot stuffing, handing leadership in the Cortes, which was parliament, back and forth between mainstream liberal and conservative parties. And they were really trying to tamp down on the change or direction too much. And then you also had the monarchy over that, and the military kind of as its own thing too. And so what that ultimately translated into is that you didn't get like in America, where the working class was actually paid quite well. The wealthiest people, or I should say the most highly compensated working class people in America, were like loggers in the Pacific Northwest. And there was a huge amount of money flowing through, all these, when you go around America and you go to these small towns, you'll see that people, they weren't wealthy, but they did quite well in terms of being bought in. They were part of the system. There wasn't going to be a Bolshevik uprising in the United States because everyone had buy-in. They had a decent amount of political power. Most of the real subversive stuff was through different ethnicities, right? So in Europe, it was different. In Europe, class was a huge issue. The Carlists, for example, and the Royalists, where those people had a real strong staying power, where they had a top to bottom influence in Spain, were these older areas where they still had kind of noblesse oblige, and the working classes did very well, like the small farmers did very well. When they industrialized it, and people kind of inaccurately say that Spain was not industrialized like the rest of Europe. You can say that's true, like in some cases, but they had very industrialized areas like Catalonia up in the north, for co-option by these more extreme leftist ideas. And so you had a lot of contradictions, and it was very disjointed in that there were regional trends, but within these areas, you would have several different factions, of influence. And interestingly, the central government in Madrid, kind of general social, like state socialist attitudes were very popular. Not communist as much, although the communists established a lot of power because of deals that different people made at the time, which makes sense given the power of the Soviet Union. But a lot of Spain, like anarchism, was like kind of the peasant and urban poor perspective that really took hold. And so these are all very different ways of thinking. And there were many, many decades where these different ways of thinking entrenched themselves, and they weren't reconciling with one another. They were staying very distinct and different from one another. And so by the time of the 1930s and the Spanish Republic, which we won't go into that transition in detail, other than to say the left basically declared that they were going to run the government, and they implemented a provisional government without elections. The legitimacy on paper, the argument that you have that like, oh, well, this was a republic, it was completely illegitimate when you look at the details. They weren't elected. They called themselves a republic, but they ignored their own constitution other than when they were like trying to crush the church, for example. And so it was all these contradictions and everyone vying for legitimacy and essentially ignoring what it would take to actually have legitimacy, which is following their own rules that they claim that they're following. And so by the time you get to 1936, you have a right wing that has been told by the left, by the supposed legitimate government, that like, even if you win elections, like, we don't care. And in fact, your winning these elections will make the left attempt to overthrow the government and chimp out in the streets as well. And they attempted to essentially ban Christianity through anarcho-tyranny. So the state would say, well, all church buildings now belong to us. Your tithes and everything are no longer going to go to supporting, charity and all these good works and everything. It's going to go to the state. And then also you can't have religious schools. Oh, and by the way, like almost all education in the whole country, other than for the very wealthy or for like the anarchists who created a lot of their own schools, they have to be run by the state, by state-approved people, basically communists. Well, so now there's no schools. So it's all these various contradictions and escalating violence. And the anarcho-tyranny element is incredibly important because the state would mostly just go after the right-wingers. Other than when like the leftist militias and everything got completely out of control, they would send in the military, as they did in 1934 during those various uprisings, which meant right-wingers because the military was being run by the most conservative elements in the leadership corps. And so at some point, after the 1934 uprisings, everyone across the board basically said, all right, we have to prepare for civil war because that's inevitable. The other guys are preparing for this. So this is what we're going to do. And so the different parties, essentially, the way that it worked in Europe and in Spain in particular was that you would have your militant wings that were attached to political parties, and the primary way that people got involved in supporting political parties was through labor unions. And so you have your big pool of labor unions, and then the political party associated with it, and then the more ideologically pure or extreme people are involved in these kind of militant groups behind the scenes. And so the anarchists, for example, the reason the anarchists were so successful in grabbing Catalonia and some other areas was that after 1934, they said, we have to actually plan ahead. We can't just have an uprising and like win. And so they began planning and training, and they created what they called a defense operating concept, which were essentially these militant cadres in a cellular structure that had jobs, which was identify your enemies in the area, class enemies, know everything about like the terrain of your area, prepare for combat operations, get equipment, get weapons, etc., and then train in all these things. And then when the jump off happens, like you have this, initially eliminate your enemies and then secure the territory and so on and so forth. And then you'll get like tasks and then opportunities for joining up and everything. So they had a very, initially competent like murder squad plan set up. The Carlists, on the other hand, created a civilian militia, the Requetés, who were trained up to a full military standard for actual infantry combat operations, and they were directly trained and led by military personnel who were basically special forces type guys, created it, and then they were able to plug into the military immediately when it was time. And interestingly, getting their support, getting the buy-in of the Rekete militias was critical to the success of the uprising in July 1936 for it to even happen. And interestingly, the Reketes are the ones who said, we will not march under the flag of the Republic. This is a totally illegitimate republic. It would be spitting in our faces to march under this flag. Influenced the whole framing that uprising engaged in. And most importantly, there was no like Francisco Franco as leader. He was never the leader of this uprising. He became the natural leader of the right wing because all these different independent groups and factions themselves had skin in the game and participated in the uprising. He didn't buy into it until like a couple days before it happened, with the murder of Jose Calvo Sotelo, who was a pretty mainstream right-wing politician, but he was also very influential and anti-Republican. So all these different groups had to coordinate with one another and, determine what do we have in common and can we work with one another? And they did that through like negotiating and basically establishing table stakes. And that's why the right wing was able to succeed, frankly, because the left wing never really did that. The left wing did everything in a top-down manner. And they basically said, these are the stakes and this is what you're going to do and you're going to get with the program. And if you don't, you get a bullet in the back of the head.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's definitely a lot. I never learned about the Spanish Civil War in school.
No one did.
Never taught about it. For obvious reasons, I think. And I think it's because of just how closely the situation over there is resembling things over here. Frankly, we still have a lot of communists up here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
I know we met each other over in Portland, and Portland, Seattle. There's a few stragglers that have come even here to North Idaho. But yeah, it's just incredible. The actual story and your book on it is fantastic. It really kind of immerses you in the action, How much time did you spend researching for your follow-up book with the Crusaders? Because I think you spent some time in the archives, like actually translating original Spanish stuff. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it was kind of funny because when I finished Faction, I really finished it in 2018, and I had been reading more about the Spanish Civil War just because it was kind of in the air, right? And when I read Mine Were of Trouble by Peter Kemp, because Mystery Grove had just republished it, I had been trying to get a copy of it previously, and I just couldn't get it. And that really kind of unlocked a lot of things for me because I realized I needed to learn about the Carlists. I needed to learn about like the real organic, behind the scenes, ground level people instead of just like the politicians and the big standout people. And that's what really tied it together for me. And I read there's like literally a handful of books in English that talk about the Carlists in detail. And I found out that like reading the big giant surveys about the war just don't give you much information about it. They're very dismissive. And so you have to dig into these other sources, and then you have to go through the bibliographies you'll find that most of it is in Spanish. And so I was able to do a lot of, I learned Spanish in high school, and then I took Latin in college. And so I've been comfortable in engaging at a very basic level with the language and like reading it to a basic degree, but there's nothing like Google Translate, baby. it like being able to translate bulk texts is a lifesaver. And so just going through PDFs and then finding other books and going through bibliographies there's a ton of right-wing Spanish information that's out there, but you have to dig into it. And it doesn't come up in the English language queries. You have to basically establish more of like a Spanish Google research profile and dig into that stuff. So honestly, I read for several years before I started writing anything, but ultimately it was like 6 to 7 years of just heavy research and writing before I was able to publish it in early 2023 or 2024. It was 2024, excuse me. I finished it and published it in very early 2024. So,
right.
Yeah, and then I've continued to, just because talking about it and doing podcasts and everything, to make sure that I'm speaking coherently, going through a lot of material there, and I still have been doing a lot of that, putting it up on my Substack mostly. Effort posts on X are kind of a waste. So I've been putting everything on my Substack, which is karldahl.substack.com. I have tons of articles out there on all kinds of topics. I have a bunch from a Spanish correspondent who's been doing research and writing articles or translating short things and putting them up there. And so I have a ton of material on all my other podcasts that I've done, or most of them are linked there too. So
nice. Yeah, and I think you've got links for that in your Twitter bio.
Correct.
And we've got a link to his Twitter down below. Make sure you are following Karl Dahl on Twitter. It's at Caudillo Dahl over there. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, or joining me today. It's going to be hard getting used to that. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. Everybody should go pick up a copy of Faction with the Crusaders. We've got links for that below. And yeah, just I guess one final thought is like, considering where we are in this country, with the war in Iran, what would you, what are your suggestions for, young men, family men, people with kids, to kind of either avoid some of the worst of what will come from this, be it economic disaster or potential civil unrest? What are your kind of prescriptions for people during this period of time in our nation's history?
I think one of the big things is that's like your lifestyle. That's great. I'm not going to tell people not to do that. But what you really need is social capital and social networks. And so there's a lot of people doing stuff around that in very coherent ways. There's like Exit Group. There's the Old Glory Club. There's a lot of people actually doing things. But the thing is, you have to actually do things. You can't just move somewhere. Like, you can't just move to North Idaho and be like, well, now Antifa will never get me.
Right.
And you have to think about the future of your children, and your children to have a future, just like, following internet advice and, having them, just have a firm handshake and go up to the lumber mill operator and just trying to eke out a living while you're just ethnically replaced in America doesn't work either. So, it involves a level of political engagement and mostly social engagement. That social capital is incredibly important, and networking, because again, you don't just join the GOP. You need a network of people behind the scenes so that you can actually move the needle. And I think like not thinking so much about like the national level stuff as much as local stuff is really the most important. You need to really build from the base. And it isn't about one group or another. It's like-minded people with similar goals. And so you have to be careful about how you do it. Can't be Fed posting. You gotta really dig in, and you have to find ways outside of the extant system and not being dependent on other people for work. Like, you need to figure out how to have multiple income streams and networking with people and just finding an alternative to what you have now, because it ain't working. And people are seeing success in this kind of shift in their mentality, and just double and triple down and understand that it's a grind, this is more than a multi-generational project. It's like reasserting that we have our own civilization.
Yeah. No, and I think that a lot of people on the right, myself included, we get very distracted with doomsdayism, end of the worldism, and there's a degree of that, I think, that's accurate. Church and Pope Francis, it's pretty difficult to see how this is not like the end of history from that perspective, from the perspective of like Fatima, things like that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, here we are. We're day 3 of this new Israel, Iran, U.S. war, and we're all still here. I mean, like, I can't tell that anything's going. I look out and maybe there's some chemtrails or something, but you can't really tell that there's something as earth shattering as this war going on when you just when you put the phone down, you turn off the TV and the computer, you just kind of like look outside. It's like a normal day. And so you've got to be building, kind of subscribing to the end times doomerism, and, that effort is useless because this is all just going to get blown up, any day, or that there's 3 days of darkness coming, any second. God is just like about to wrap the world in like a hellstorm of fire or something like that. You know what I mean? That kind of makes it, I feel like those types of sentiments are like extremely counterproductive, and the right has fallen for that since like the 60s and the 70s. You can see it in all the old Christian identity propaganda all throughout the 70s and 80s, that it's like the end of the world. And so you get these people that they move up to the mountains, they check out, they tune out, they don't cultivate social networks, they don't cultivate businesses. And then, here we are 50 years later, and we're essentially still at step 1, which is building ground game,
exactly,
rebuilding social cohesion. And so this is definitely something that's not gonna happen because we vote for a guy in DC for president. It's not going to happen next year. It's something that's going to happen maybe by the time you're a grandfather, I think. Maybe not you, but me.
If you say there's no future, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
And the future belongs to those who show up. And, again, I've been around for a while. The number of like failed, like intentional communities and everything that aren't very well thought out or weren't very well thought out that I'm aware of is staggering. The number of people who moved off to the middle of nowhere and then just like ran out of money and couldn't do it anymore. They got divorced or whatever. Don't drive yourself crazy. Try to get emotional distance from all this stuff, because you can't do anything to influence it, like, obviously. So why would you like put all your intent into that? Like, I know people who've gone completely crazy in the last 5-7 years, and I knew people who went crazy before for various reasons, but there are people out there who are essentially completely crazy because their whole world is this online like doom scrolling and like, oh, it's this and that and the other thing, and it's like, well, you got to keep on trucking. There's much ruin in a nation. You have to have children so that if you actually care about this, which you claim to, so that you can build a future for them, that gives you a lot to do, frankly, and positive outlets for your energy, frankly. You have to create an alternative to it. No one is going to hand you an alternative, and you're not going to get the easy way out, which is being blown up by nukes. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So you have to build, and building is fun. It's not easy, but it can get real fun, and the satisfaction that you get from things like actually developing things that have a future is wonderful. And that takes different forms, and it takes all kinds. And check out some of these groups that are doing that are actually doing it, and not just like parading around online trying to do fundraising and stuff like that.
Right.
Be very discriminating, and you need to leave the house and go out and let that sun hit you in the face, and talk to human beings, and you'll find that it's not that scary. There's a lot of really good stuff going on, and just being obsessed with like evil people in the Middle East, is not a good thing.
Yeah,
you have to be aware of it.
It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. It's not the whole thing. So
and the days of I think the days of the draft are pretty much over. But I'll also say this: if they are forced into a position where they have to try to draft people, there are many ways to say no. And maybe that is your purpose in life, is to stop your children and other people's children from being drafted into a meat grinder. And so, yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure you follow Karl Dahl on X. You can find a link to his X account here in the Rumble and YouTube description. He's also on Substack, karldahl.substack.com, and his books are available over on Amazon. So thank you so much. I don't think we have any questions for you, so I'm not going to make you sit through the ad reads, but thank you so much for joining us today, Karl.
Thanks a lot, man. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye. All right. Very good. He was great, man. We had a chance to meet IRL over the summer, and he really knows what he's talking about. And the books are great. I've been reading the Faction with the Crusaders for the past couple of months. It's nice to read something that's like, it's fiction, but it's not brain rotting. It actually, you can like pick some stuff up in the book, which I think is pretty neat. So definitely go check that out. We've got some contractual obligations. I got to tell you about odggsupply.com. They are our preferred place to shop for military surplus. And, with the war unfolding in the Middle East, with, craziness unfolding in places like Minneapolis, and I'm sure there's about to be a whole wave of protests all across the United States, things could get hairy, and you need good tactical supplies to keep yourself going. You can visit odggsupply.com. They've got blankets, they've got thermal night vision, they've got MREs, all kinds of stuff, things for your guns, armor, helmets, the whole 9 yards. And if you visit them and use promo code Backlash25, you will get free shipping on your order. So please check out our friends at odggsupply.com and follow them on X at PNW Gorilla and I think ODGG_supply over on Instagram. They've got some really great stuff. We've got some super chats. We're going to read your super chats in just a minute. So get your last minute super chats in at thebacklash.net/superchat, or you can send it on Rumble or YouTube, and we will read it there. Also need to tell you about Above Time Coffee. I'm actually drinking some of it right now, the light organic New England roast. This stuff over here, absolutely fantastic. You do not need, it's great for Lent too. The coffee itself is like sweet, so you don't need a bunch of sugar. You don't need to pour a bunch of milk in it. You can just drink it black. It'll put hair on your, no, I'm kidding. It will not put hair on your chest because it's very tasty. But visit AboveTimeCoffee.com. Use promo code Backlash10. You will get 10% off. It is some of the best hand-roasted small batch fair trade non-kosher coffee that money can buy. Visit abovetimecoffee.com. And of course, all of our links to all of our different sponsors are available on the internet. If I'm not glitched out, it looks like I'm glitched. This is impossible, man. There we go. There's our affiliates. Sorry, I really don't understand what's going on with the glitching on the computer. But anyway, I don't know what you heard, but I said if you want to visit all of our affiliate links at thebacklash.net/affiliates, you can get links to all of our wonderful sponsors and partners over there. Let's read a couple super chats. Let's see what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for joining today and taking some time. It's today, the 2nd. Blackout King 213 sent $10 on Rumble. W. Thank you very much, Blackout King. The Winged Hussar sent $20 on Rumble. Really appreciate the great show, and I will be looking up those books. Yeah, please do. They're very good. I highly recommend them. We got to get together again, man. The Winged Hussar, good friend of the show. Thank you so much for sticking with us. IRL Con sent $10 on Rumble. Resilient. Yes. Yes, we are. I don't know what that means. Nothing over on entropy. But yeah, no, things have been, besides the stupid war in Iran, things have been going pretty good. We had a bunch of events over this past weekend. For those of you that are aware, we did do a little black tie dinner posting with Matt Gaetz. I didn't want to talk about that before the show, but Matt Gaetz was in town, had a chance to meet up with him, brought a nice group of people out for dinner. Let's see here. All of your favorite extremists. It's like this is what they're afraid of. Normal people, like normal married couples. We had a vet at the table. It was very good time. So thank you to everybody who showed up. There was a crazy protest too outside of the event on Saturday. Let's see if you can hear. When I rolled up, they all recognized me and started calling me a Nazi. It was pretty funny. Let's see. It's so funny. It's like you're just like driving up to the resort. He's a Nazi, get him. Anyway, so that was fun. But yeah, rebuilding social cohesion, social networks, that is definitely the way forward. And we've got a lot of really interesting interviews to that effect that will be coming up. Looking forward to it. Next Monday, we are going to be joined by Jose Nino. For those of you who, pay attention to all of these different podcasts and stuff, Jose Nino has been coming out with some really excellent stuff, especially on what's going on in South America, the Venezuela connection. He's been doing a lot of writing on his Substack about that, and the Iran war. So we are looking forward to talking with him next Monday, and then we've got some more big stuff. We're working on something with Kevin McDonald pretty soon, hopefully, and some of the other authors over at Antelope Hill. So that will be very good. And speaking of the authors at Antelope Hill, they are fighting to keep history alive amidst a regime of anti-white censorship, and they are fighting to equip a new generation of dissidents with the books, the literature, and the tools that they need to fight for their families and for our country's future. Their varied catalog includes newly updated and expanded third edition of Dr. Kevin McDonald's book, The Culture of Critique, the essential modern text on Jewish identity, more important now than ever, especially with this war in Iran. Also, Dr. Ricardo Deschain's magnum opus, Greatness and Ruin, the definitive scholarly examination of European exceptionalism, as well as works by Kerry Bolton, Paul Kersey, and Josh Neal. Antelope Hill recently brought David Irving's iconic Nuremberg the Last Battle back into print and have numerous translations of historical works from eras such as Fascist Italy, National Socialist Germany, and Civil War Spain, previously unavailable in English. There are also plenty of books on contemporary issues such as transgenderism, the opioid crisis, and Christian nationalism, as well as history books, novels, and children's books. So whatever your interest is, you're bound to find books that you like at Antelope Hill Publishing, all professionally published with sleek, modern cover art. Help us and help our people by checking out companies that share our values and fight for our cause. Visit antelopehillpublishing.com and please use promo code BACKLASH10. You will get 10% off your purchase. And of course, their latest book, The Essay Cleans Up by Heinz Lohman. I got a copy of that coming on the way, so I will give that a read and tell you a little bit more about it. But it should be a very interesting memoir about a Prussian teenager who was a medical student but decided to become a right-wing activist in Nazi Germany. Was I frozen? Did I freeze again? I think I did. So anyway, that'll be very cool. Also have to give a shout out to North Idaho Tallow Company. They've got amazing soap and skincare products that won't turn you gay. They don't have any endocrine disruptors and no fake unnatural fragrances. Visit idahotallow.com, and on your order over $100, you will get free shipping. So please check out our wonderful sponsor, North Idaho Tallow Company. Now, something else that's worth talking about is since the war in Iran has kicked off, the markets are going to be getting crazier and crazier. It looks like gold and silver took a little bit of a hit today. Might be a good time to buy, actually. And if you did want to protect your wealth with precious metals, you can do that at atlasbullion.com/backlash. Gold is sitting at $5,337 an ounce. Silver is at $89.89 an ounce. And I think that we're going to probably see all of that stuff go higher as the world order is actively reshaped over the next several weeks. Don't really know how this war in Iran is going to go, but certainly things are going to change, and probably not for the better for those of us living here in the West. So we'll see. Definitely pray for our country, pray for the Iranians. Nobody would want to have their country blown up and all of their leaders killed overnight. So that's going to be crazy, especially with the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. Let's see what else. What else do we have? It's crazy. I saw Jim Risch over the weekend, and he gave a speech on Saturday about how we have to support Donald Trump and blah blah blah. And, this isn't like Iraq or Afghanistan. None of our troops have died. And then, literally 5 hours later, the CENTCOM report comes out that, as a matter of fact, three of our fighters are dead, and it's not even that they were hit by hostile forces. Am I frozen again? This is just undoable. I'm going to get out of here soon if my computer keeps freezing like this. But what I was saying is, the first three casualties in this war with Iran, they appear to be friendly fire, actually, which is just unbelievable. Our military is just so unprepared for all of that. And I'm sure you saw, was it the USS, was it the Abraham Lincoln or something? The boat, all of the toilets were backing up. Just half a year ago, you'll recall that there was a carrier, a fighter jet carrier that took a turn a little too hard, and a bunch of our planes fell off the carrier into the ocean. And now it looks like we're shooting our own boys down. It's just unbelievable. So pray for our country. We'll have more updates for you. We'll be back on Wednesday with another big show. So thank you so much for tuning in. I don't really have that much insight other than what's, coming out on social media right now. And 90% of that is probably fake and gay. There's a lot of fake protests going on with all of these supposed Iranian diaspora. When you actually look at what's going on the ground in Tehran, there are massive protests in support of the now assassinated, martyred Ayatollah, and I don't think we're going to see the regime change that the Israelis want over there. But, time will tell. So anyway, thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more later this week. Hug your kids. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless. Have a good one. Bye-bye.